Okay guys, check this out. We have our question sequence in our ADI set with our prompts, but now we have multiple choice and we're able to evaluate that multiple choice and say, hey, you chose this one, pancakes, aren't they great? And on top of that, we can go back into our ADI answer collection table here and we can see the answers that the users have chosen. We can see that they chose pancakes in multiple choice, and we can see that that user also believes that pancakes are great. I'm your host, Sean MacKenzie. Thank you for joining me once again on my channel on data engineering. In this episode, we go back to our application domain intelligence playlist with Microsoft Access, and we're going to do part 2 of doing a list dialog, which allows us to do multiple choice questions in our ADI framework. Now, of course, up till now, we've been able to evaluate the responses from yes/no questions or input box questions, but now it's a little bit more tricky because we need to do multiple choice. So what we're going to do today is we're going to make a few changes to our ADI framework logic, as well as do a custom function that's going to allow us to evaluate if somebody chose option A, then go down this logic path if somebody chose option B, etc., etc. Let's get to it. Interested in more cool topics like these? Make sure to check out my Patreon. The link is in the description. Okay guys, let's get started. We're using the same file that we've been using in our other videos on the application domain intelligence playlist. And we're going to look at some logic that we did before. Now there's our ADI module, which has the standard ADI stuff in it. And then we've got our custom module. And that's really going to be a little bit more tailored to your application. You can also use classes for this if you want, but I've chosen to use functions for our demonstration. You can see that on our last yes no was yes function, we're using this ADI yes no query. Now we're doing a dmax on that, and we're using the query, and we're also looking up the answer in the ADI answer table. And to help us with that, what we did was we created this ADI yes no query. So you can see this ADI yes no query, and we did this in a previous episode. And basically what we did was we just took all the answers, joined it with the prompts to get the type, and said show me only ones that are yes no answers. And of course, so how would we do it for a different type? Well, we can do the same strategy, and so I'll copy that query and I'm just going to paste the query in the query section there. It gives me the option to save it, paste as, and I'll call this one ADI listbox. We'll make it nice and easy, and we'll get rid of that copy of there, and we're going to save that as our ADI list box lookup. So now we're going to have another query to do that, and of course we have to change the query. So we're going to open that in design view now, and all we have to do is change the criteria to list box, which is the type of prompt that we created, and that will give us all of the answers that are of the type list box. And so then we can do a dmax on that, and that'll give us the last one for the user, just like we did in the previous function there. We'll do that in a moment, but now we can see here are our answers, and these are ones that we created during the testing in the previous episode. Make sure to go back to the previous episode if you didn't see how to set up your ADI list dialog, which is a form that operates like a yes/no message box. And so we're going to use the same strategy here. We're going to get the last answer using that dmax like we did in the last yes/no was yes function, except now what we're going to do is we're going to use, of course, we're going to look up the multiple choice answer as opposed to the yes/no answer. Okay, let's get to it and create our function. So we're going to have a function that returns whatever the last list box selection was, and so we'll say last list box selection was, and then we're going to ask it, was it pancakes, or was it bacon and eggs? So that's what that str selection is. And so remember, in the ADI custom functions, we're following a strategy where all of the functions return true or false, and that makes it so that we can put this into a framework and we can have our very simple logic on every node. And so we'll put a comment at the top saying that we're going to pass back true or false, whether the selection was the selected argument or not, and then we can get started. So first thing we'll do is let's set up a Boolean for our return value, and we'll set up a return variant as well. Those are always handy to have in your procedures. I use them for everything. And you can also set up a long integer for the answer to load up with a proper long integer if everything works and we get what we're looking for. And of course, at the end of our function, we're going to set the value of our function equal to the return variable, which is a Boolean, which is a yes, no. And there we go. So now we've got sort of the scaffolding for a little procedure here, and our little function, and we are good to go. So now we're going to do a lot of the same as what we did in our previous function down here, where you can see, and so we're actually going to be able to reuse a lot of this code here. It's going to be a little bit different because we are not looking at a Boolean, of course. We are looking for a text answer that's going to have that selection in it that we are passing in. So first things first, we're going to put that line in with the variant, and we'll do our dmax, except this time we're going to look up in the ADI listbox query as opposed to the ADI yes no query, because we're going to look for the last value that was answered by the user in a list box. And so that's what we're doing here. So we're going to get that value. What did those guys answer? And if it's not a null, of course, we will go ahead and load our long integer answer, and that's going to help us to create our DLOOKUP here. So we'll do a return value is equal to the DLOOKUP, and we're going to look up the answer in the ADI answer table, or query I should say, and we will look for the answer ID, which is the last answer that we loaded into that answer long integer variable there. And that's going to make it nice and clean, so it's very easy to troubleshoot. You can put breakpoints on each of these lines and you can see what the loaded value was in the long integer there, and things like that. And so now what we can do is we can say if the return value is equal to the selection we passed into our function, then of course the return value for the whole function is true. And that makes our yes no function sort of complete there. We can get rid of these lines here, and very, very simple. That's going to say, hey, if we pass in pancakes and we get the last answer using that answer there, and we do a DLOOKUP on it, and it also says pancakes, then return true, otherwise return false. And that's it. So now you've got a function that can be used in coordination with that ADI listbox query, and we are good to go. And so now we have a function, looks into this listbox query. It says, hey, for answer 155, was it yogurt with fruit? Return true, otherwise return false. And so very, very simple. That's how the ADI nodes work. They're looking for that true or false return on each condition. And so we are going to be able to use our function now. One of the next things we need to do is we need to go into the ADI function table. We're going to add our new function to the table. And we can give it a friendly name for the non-programmer users that will select this in a drop-down. And we'll call it last listbox selection. And I think I've forgotten the function name exactly, so we can go back to our IDE here, and we can copy the name of the function that we just created, and we'll just paste it into our ADI function table. And that'll set us up so that the user can choose that. They can choose the function if they are looking for whatever the last selected answer was in the list box there. And so now we can open our ADI set form and see what we got here. So we've got our node name, our condition, pass and fail, and this condition ID is something that we are looking for But of course, one of the things we really need to add to our subform there, our node subform, is the ability to have, to be able to put pancakes in. We want to say, hey, just on this node, if we select the condition that uses our function, our new function, we want to pass in pancakes as the argument. So we can say, hey, was it pancakes that was selected? Was it yogurt that was selected? And so let's right click on that table and go into the design mode, and we're going to add a new field into our table here. This is going to be one of the first additions to the original design that we're doing. We're going to add a custom arguments field name, and that's going to be a short text so that we can ask if a selection was a particular thing. And that's going to allow us to have great flexibility in how we can use the framework, and it's going to add a lot of power to what we do. So we'll save that table, open our ADI node subform again, and we can take a look at this. And it looks like we're going to have to create a little bit of real estate on our form here. And whoops, grabbed the wrong thing. We'll Control Z that one, and we'll grab those buttons there. Whoops, I selected the subform too. You can shift click to unselect that, and we'll grab all those buttons and we'll move them over just for a moment here. I'm going to try and keep it the same width as this subform here. We need another text box, so I'm just clicking on node name and Control C, Control V. That's going to paste the entire text box as a new text box on the form there, and I just moved it up beside our condition so we have something to type into, and we can move the rest of those guys back over. And let's move this button up here. I know that you guys are probably designing way prettier forms than me, so I'm not spending a lot of time on these, but there we go. We've got all of our items at the top there. Let's shift down a little bit so that we've got some space for our button at the top there, and then we're good to go. We can start designing this text box here, so we can click on that, right click and go properties, and we are going to take a look at this text box. So the control source for that is going to be our new field. That's going to be the custom arguments field, and so we'll create a name that makes sense if we look at it in code. So we'll put something like txt custom arguments. That'll give it a nice descriptive name. You can do that on the other tab there, and we'll also need to make an adjustment to our label. Not as critical to have the label named in our other tab there. It's still called label 13, but we'll put custom args as the caption, and now we've got that set there. So let's go back to the other tab. We're going to go across all of our controls here. We're going to set that first one to 0. So let's set the first one to a tab index of 0. This is when you hit tab on the keyboard, where the where the focus goes on each of the controls. So we're just going to set those in order, so that when we get to this form and we hit tab across from each entry, we have a node name, we hit tab, it goes to condition ID. We choose one, we hit tab, it goes to custom arguments, for those people that like their keyboards instead of their mice. Okay, so let's save that and we'll close it. So now we've got our node form fixed up, and now we can move on to our conditions. And so there is our condition table. We have not created a form for this since it's pretty simple to manage in the background, but you can create a form for this one if you like. And of course, what are we going to do? We're going to create a new condition, and we're going to use this function here. We'll copy that function name, and we're going to put that into a condition here. So let's add a new row, and we'll put in a condition name. We can call it last listbox selection was, or something along those lines. And then we're going to put our condition description. You can type in a description for that, and then we'll paste in last listbox selection was into the condition itself. Now remember, the condition evaluates to true or false, as we are using the power of dynamic programming with the eval function, which is available in many different programming languages, and we will be extending this into Python as well. But what we can do is we'll put our condition name as the function, and we'll put in a nice description there, checks if the last answer was, and then we'll fill the argument when the node executes. And that's where we're going next. So let's go ahead and modify our ADI code. This is the framework code that we built right from the very beginning. This is one of the first changes that we're making to the original code, and we are going to be taking a look at a couple of different things here. So this is the node, as you guys remember. Each node evaluates a condition and then goes to a different node depending on whether the evaluation result was true or false. And so if our node record is going to have a new argument field on it, we also need to have an argument field available in our condition is true function that we created that returns true or false. So let's go and take a look at that right now. So we'll go to our condition is true function, and what we want to do is we're going to create the ability to have an optional argument passed into our condition when it executes. And so we can do that by using an optional argument on our function. And so the optional argument we'll set it to an empty string if it is, if it's not used. So it could be that, we have conditions like we have now where we don't pass any arguments in, but if we do pass in an argument, we're going to use that in our function. So there's the optional keyword there, and that's going to make it so that we don't have to, specify this argument if we are calling condition is true. But if we want to use it, we can, and if we don't use it, it'll be equal to an empty string. That's where we set the equals equal to 2 double quotes there. And so that allows us to pass an argument into our function, our condition is true function, and you can see here's where we get our actual expression. In this line here, we load that string expression there, and now what we can do is we can add to our expression, and we can say, evaluate the expression, but if the length of the arguments is greater than 0, then we're going to add a single bracket, and then we'll add our arguments, and then we'll put a closing bracket, and that will be it. Our expression will be evaluated, and if it has arguments, then those arguments will be put into brackets so that it can be evaluated. So we will be passing a function into that expression in that case, and if the length of the argument string is greater than 0, then we're going to put those arguments in brackets here, and that's going to create our function. But if it's not, then we're just going to evaluate the function. That's the empty string there. Let's go ahead and save this, and we are good to go. From there, let's go ahead and take a look at our node function, our doNode function. So this is the function that does a single node. It does all of the evaluation of the condition, and then it does the prompts and actions. And there is our condition is true call that we're making to the condition is true function, and we're going to add our argument in there. So we've done a select star on our ADI node there. So we're getting the entire row, so that means it'll get our new arguments field, and we're going to load that arguments field into a variable, of course. So we'll grab that strargs there, and let's load that with the arguments field that is in our record set. So the record set is already open, so all we have to do is basically add the RST custom arguments there. I've accounted for nulls with the double quotes. You can also use an NZ function there, or NZ function, but we are good to go there. So let's go take a look here. The ADI node, we called it custom args. That is the new field that we put in there. If we go to the design view, you can see it here. It is a short text that we added earlier in this episode, and that's what we want to see there. Let's grab our code here. Just wanted to make sure that that custom args field name was correct, so that looks like it is correct. So there is our arguments line. We're going to load that string with the custom arguments that are in the field if they are in fact there. And then next what we can do is we can add those as the optional argument for our condition is true. And so now we're going to be passing in either an empty string or we're going to be passing in some arguments. And so that makes it nice and flexible. That's going to make it easy for us to use. And now we will have the ability to add arguments to our nodes. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at our ADI set form here, and we can double click and open that one, and you can see there are two sets. There's our sort of test set that has all kinds of crazy stuff in it, that we're going to be using that today. Check if it's Jim. You can click on go to start and it will grab the first node for that particular ADI set, and you can see it checks if it's Jim signing in, and if it is Jim, it does all those prompts you see there, and then it goes to the validate fizzer stock check, which does this fizzer check, and if it is false, it goes to the purple fizzers notification. Otherwise, you are done, and you can double click the end node to go back to the start, or you can click go to start. But here is the list box selection we created in our last episode, and if we do a pass on that first node and we go to the end of that sequence where the pass exists, we could add another node onto the end of our set here, or this sort of branch of the network, to use our new function. So we could go down the fail node path, or we could go down the pass node path, and instead of going back to the beginning here, we could actually just add a new node, which will check for pancakes. And so how can we do that? Well, we'll go into our node form here, our node subform, which is the second set of navigation buttons, and we'll hit new node. So that's going to give us a new record on that table, and then we can go ahead and we'll give our node a name here, and the name we can use is check if they had pancakes, and then we'll add the list box select was. That's our new condition that we just added to our condition table, but now we can add a custom argument. We can say pancakes. So last list box selection was pancakes, and of course let's make sure that we put double quotes around that, because that is a string. You can tell users about numbers and other things if you want to make them a bit more capable. But from there we can hit our go to start again to take us right back to the beginning, and we'll add that new node to the end of our sequence here. So that first node's going to do all those prompts, and then it's going to go here to this next node, which is the validate fizzer. And if that's true, we're going to tag onto the end of this. We're going to check for those pancakes. So we're going to say check if they have pancakes. That's a node that we just created, and we could add another node if we wanted to. Just like before, we could create a new node, and we could call that node the pancake message, I guess, which is indicating that we're on a branch now that is specifically because they chose pancakes in the multi-select. And so there we go. We can just put a true condition on this one, so it's just going to go down the true branch. Very simple. And we're not going to put any nodes for our pass or fail. It's just going to be the end of this particular branch, and we'll just do a yes/no prompt for this one. And we can say, you had pancakes. Don't you think those are great? So we'll add that prompt into our prompt text field there, and we can say, aren't they great? And that's going to be a yes/no question, so that's going to get an answer in the answer table. And we don't need a prompt selection for this one. It's just a yes/no. We can save that one, and then we can hit go to start, and that's going to take us right back to the beginning. We'll navigate forward to the fizzer check, and if the fizzer check condition passes, it will go to the check for pancakes. Now this is going to be the checking for pancakes. Of course, they already selected pancakes in the prompts of the first node, so now we're just going back and we're looking for that. We can hit refresh lists. That's going to add that new node to this drop down, and now we can say if they did choose pancakes, because we get a true result from the condition, then we can navigate to the pancake message node. And of course, keep in mind that it will not go to the pancake message node if they chose yogurt with fruit or something like that. So we can close our form and let's go test it out. We need to put a worker in because this is context aware, and it's only going to fire if it was Jim that was logged in. And of course we typed in Jim, so now we can enter some stuff. This is one of the prompts in the first node. You can say, are you feeling great? That's another prompt, and this is the last prompt in the first node. And we can select pancakes, and then an action was performed on the first node. Then it goes to the next node, which is the fizzer check. And looks like we just got the make sure you don't sell fizzers, and that means that the fizzer check failed, and it went to the fail node ID, and it did not go to our pancake check. And so we need to make sure that there are fizzers being sold, because otherwise it won't go down the branch that we want. So let's take a look at our condition table, and we can see that condition 1, the fizzer check, does a delookup on our candy table, and it checks for our fizzers. And if the fizzers returns, a number, basically if it's not null, then we get a true. Otherwise, it's a false. And so here we go. Let's add fizzers back into our inventory so that we can go down our pancake node path there. And so let's add our fizzers here. We'll do 10.99 for fizzers. We'll say purple fizzers as the name. And so now that we have that in stock, this should evaluate to true, and it should go to our pancake message. So let's go ahead and rerun it. So we got Jim, he hit start, and then we type some stuff into that prompt. We get a yes/no prompt, which is one of the prompt types, and then we get our list dialog prompt, which is another prompt type, and then we get a couple of actions that happen because now we're evaluating to true, and it says, hey, you had pancakes, aren't they great? And you can say yes or no, and it will record that answer as part of the logic there. And so that is finished. Now some of you might be wondering if we could have saved a node and added the message onto the true branch of the actual pancake check, and you're absolutely right. So as you can see, there's many ways to optimize how you use this as well. So let's go check out our answers here. We can check out our answer table, and we can scroll to the end here, and you can see the answers that we provided to prompts along the way. And yes, there it is. You can see there is our pancake selection from the list dialog, followed by the answer yes to aren't pancakes great. And so you can see that we went down an entirely new path that completes the list dialog for ADI. Want to protect your remote desktop from unwanted RDP spammers? Make sure to check out the additional links in the description.